Welcome to Directionally Correct, a P-Linux podcast with Cole and Scott. Today's guest, Charles Handler.
Thanks to our sponsors, Orgnostic. Fast track the insights behind your people data using Orgnostic by connecting all your HR data in one people analytics platform. Quickly uncover the insights you need to measure the success of your people initiatives. Orgnostic is the most innovative people analytics, generative AI, data orchestration, and employee listening tool on the market. To learn more, book a demo at orgnostic.com/directionallycorrect. Because you're at the SIOP LEC, aren't you?
I am taking. I left the programming right now to come do this, but it was actually on an area that isn't really as interesting to me as some of the others. So.
Well, we promise not to tell anybody on a podcast or anything like that.
No, I want to talk about that I'm here. I mean, there's been some really interesting stuff. It's actually been a very good conference. Like I'm very impressed so far.
What are some of the highlights?
Well, I think just really good. So one of the things is I really like the format. The format is blocks of 15-minute presentations around a subject area. So even though you're sitting for 2 hours, which is almost impossible for me to do, you've got new content and short. People aren't dragging on; they're getting to the point. And it's been really good. It's all about assessment, which is my focal area. So the whole yesterday was all AI based stuff, all different aspects of it, and then today it's been more about cognitive ability and like the Paul Sackett's latest research showing that G isn't actually some superior supreme predictor, that actually the Schmidt and Hunter's
G's just a letter.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. But all the stuff that I've been doing in my practice all along, which is not to brag that I know everything, but probably it's just serendipity or accidental, but that you don't really have to use cognitive to do well. And when you do a whole person assessment where you're looking at a bunch of different things, that composite actually predicts as well or better than cognitive, even when cognitive's not in there, based on meta-analyses. He also kind of debunked, Schmidt and Hunter 98, which is the go-to. Everybody says to show G is the best, but it's like that data's 50 years old. Jobs have changed. The way you relate to your job and what you need to relate to your job has changed. So quite a bit of, the foundational work that was done in that study, and then the corrections they did. So when we do validation work, I never correct for anything because I think it's BS. Just to try and make yourself look good or make your results look good. So when he stripped away all the corrections and all that stuff, again, it was deflated by over half. It's like a 0.51 core validity coefficient for a G. Well, it went down to like 0.2. Once you take all the BS hydraulics, my professor in grad school always used to call them, pumping up your validity coefficients. Got some sirens going, so you can tell
They're coming
I'm
after
embedded.
you, man.
I'm an embedded journalist. That's what I feel like.
You're spitting. You're getting too close to the truth, clearly. And
Yeah, exactly. They're gonna catch me. Exactly.
Does that make sense to you, though? I mean, like from the 1950s to now, the world's become more complicated. It doesn't feel that cognitive ability should be deflated. It should be inflated, right?
Well, I think it depends on how you do it and what you look at. I mean, he was saying, and the real gist of the whole thing, which again is very aligned with my personal philosophy, is you want to measure how well someone does on the job. Give them job related stuff. Give them tasks. Give them structured interviews. Give them work samples. Give them simulations. Give them job specific knowledge. Those things together tend to do way better. You're applying your cognitive smarts to those things, I think, but it's more applied to behaviors and things that you'd actually be doing on the job.
That's crazy.
I'll tell you,
man.
Oh, come on. I'll tell you a story. Is I started grad school, and I felt a little lost. My first seminar class or whatever, very first year, I'd taken one IO class, was selection methods. You go to the copy shop, that doesn't happen now, and they give you this, case of like beer case box or whatever, and it's stacked with articles, and you got to read 100 pages a week or something. Before I learned, you just read the abstract and the conclusion conclusions, you know, and I was really lost, but I got assigned a paper on work samples. I'll never forget it. Asher and Sciarino, 1974. It was the basis of my term paper or whatever. It's called point-to-point correspondence. You want to measure how well someone can do on a job, give them a miniature replica of the damn job and see how they do. What could be more pure than that? And instantly, all the BS of all this heady stuff that we were trying to learn just made sense to me because it was so practical. And I feel like that's still true today and will always be true. Our methods of getting there are getting more and more like technology is allowing us to get closer to simulating jobs more easily than we have been able to do in the past, right? So I think that's a good piece of it. So
let me introduce you really quick, Charles, just because you sound like a man for my heart talking about practical research. Oh my gosh, I think I'm just like smitten over here. But Dr. Charles Handler is a renowned IO psychologist with deep specialization in talent assessment, hiring practices, and AI ethics, which I'm sure we'll get into. You are the driving force behind Rocket Hire, a consultancy focused on science, technology, and the ethics of employee systems or employee selection systems. And you're a sought after speaker and a fellow of the Society of Industrial Organizational Psychology. So I know you've had quite a distinguished career. We could probably talk about that quite a bit. And I've been looking forward to this. So thank you so much for joining us, Charles. I am curious, kind of to the point that we're making on work relatedness, on all of these kind of topics. Is there an AI spin to work relatedness and talent assessment? Like, is there ways of making simulations of a real work environment that somebody would have to interact in? And do you think that maybe is the future of like high fidelity selection?
Mm. Yeah, so there's actually was some pretty cool presentations here. Someone from Meta, I believe, was talking about a lot of the work they did, research work to see and look, everything's all over, especially large language models here, you know, and
Mm-hmm.
it's everywhere, and we're looking how to use that responsibly. And so they did studies about AI generated situational judgment scenarios, AI generated, interview questions and these kind of things. And how did other people who are trained to do this rate those in terms of their quality, right? So these things were rated a pretty high quality, and I've used it a lot to do these kind of things and just to toy around with it. And it's the same basic mantra that you get across every AI thing, basically. It's a great foundational thing. It saves you a buttload of time. It gets you much closer to where you want to go. But if you just take it and run without any kind of human intervention or interaction, you're probably going to cheat yourself of an opportunity to make the output of this thing better. So I think it's a lot about the efficiency that we're finding. And if you've ever had to write behavioral anchor scales, or ever write these scenarios, it takes time, right? It takes a lot of time. Now, I feel like a lot of times, job analysis is one of my specialties. It's near and dear to my heart because I get to go watch people work. I get out of the office and I get into stocking candy in a Walmart, which I've done before. You see America and the world in a different way when you become a worker and you're doing these hourly jobs. So when I'm in that Walmart stocking this candy for my client who's a large international chocolate manufacturer, let's just say, boy, I'm just looking at scenarios. I'm looking at how these people work and I'm taking notes and I'm being like, all right, here's a scenario that I can put into an SJT, it's Easter. We were doing it during Easter. It's Easter, and the boxes are all mixed up, and you've only got this much time, and you don't have enough Cadbury cream eggs to fill this thing. What do you do? Stuff like that. Really cool stuff. So, yeah, exactly. But that's what you face on the job. Now, there's a certain amount of that you have to watch for, and I think this is where GTP could be actually good. Is there's certain procedures that you wouldn't know unless you're already in the organization. So you have to kind of genericize it to look at how does this person think on their feet? How do they react to stress? How do they deal with an angry customer? That's one of them. One of them, I think, was like, and this happened to me. Like I'm trying to move something, and there's an old lady in front of me just going, half a mile an hour, and I'm like needing to get this candy, to the stock room or whatever. And I'm like,
Gotta get
okay,
that
what do I
candy to
do?
the stock room.
Am I going to run over this person? What am I going to do? And in that stock room, it's like the same. They always said, I think it was Newman, right? In Seinfeld, the mail never stops. The mail never stops, right? That's why people go postal. So those trucks never stop at a Walmart, man. They're coming in, and it's like, you got to bum rush and get it out of there. So long-winded way of answering your question. I think it can be super helpful. It can save us a lot of time. Um, would I want to just take one it generated and just go with it? No, I don't think that's a good idea. And we're seeing research that kind of shows that.
The beauty of automatically generated items is, like, once again, like, you have this sort of remote proctoring of items, and people can cheat easily. Like, you got like
Oh
a friend
gosh,
there, they can look onto it. But like, once you use those items, they need to be burned. So you need to create new items, and they need to be
yeah,
valid. They need to be of the
yep,
appropriate difficulty level, this sort of thing. And that's the real beauty of these automatically generated items. You can just create like an entire pool on the fly. It's amazing.
yeah. I've done it. Yeah, I've done it for sure with knowledge items. I've fed it knowledge items and said, write me a different version, or if I have a test plan
Yeah.
for one of our clients about how much you know about mobile technology. It's a call center doing tech support, and so I have an area of let's call it phone operating systems. So I can just say, write me 3 questions about phone operating systems. And sometimes it writes really crappy multiple choice questions, and you kind of have to guide it or it'll go astray. But that's another part of knowing how to work with this thing is, being able to actually guide it to tell you things that are more accurate. So it's a dialogue. It's a
And like,
dialogue.
not having to review those items, but still have the right theta level is
Yeah,
really critical.
yeah. I review them
Dropping some
anyway. Just for
item response Siri lingo in
Oh
there.
yeah.
Let's do
Yeah,
it, man.
yeah, we're not doing any IRT. I saw a really cool presentation about, which was a little over my head about, which talking about what I'm seeing here about, you know, bias in IRT items and how that can be perpetuated across the way all those different parameters are working and stuff. Again, I don't do enough with IRT. I understand the fundamentals of it for sure. You don't want me to build that for you, but I can sure find somebody who can help me. So, anyway,
Well,
so
I will say that, like, I told someone that, like, I was talking to Charles Hanley, so like, damn, he's a big deal, and I was like, oh shit, okay, here we
I don't
go.
know about that. I appreciate that, but I asked, yeah, I interviewed ChatGTP for my podcast, and it was a really interesting guest. So I asked it to tell me a joke, and it said, why did the Scarecrow win an award? And they said because it was outstanding in its field, And I said, well, how did you
Nice,
choose that
nice,
Oh,
joke? Yeah,
nice.
oh, well
yeah.
done.
I said, how'd you choose that joke? It said, well, that's a very well-known joke, so my probability said that it would make you laugh, kind of thing. And I'm like, wow. Um, it was a really entertaining guest. That episode will come out soon. So
So you've got a popular podcast called Science for Hire. How did you get into the podcasting space? And if the the discussion leads this direction, also, like, how did you get into kind of the independent side of talent assessment as well?
yeah, that's a long story and a short story. The first one being the shortest story. But I'll also tell you, I want to sidebar for a second while in the background I'm thinking of my answers. But I've had a podcast since 2019. It's only the second time I've been on someone else's podcast, and that one was just like a little snippet of 5 minutes on like a composite of something. So I'm really honored, and even just watching what you guys do and your production and everything has given me ideas how to up my game. So I do appreciate the invitation. And I actually was talking to one of my advisors more on the marketing side, who I check in with every once in a while. And I was talking about, hey, I need to reach more people with my message. I'm well known in IO world, but my primary client is a talent acquisition person who knows jack about assessment and needs an expert so they don't make mistakes. And I always say my primary competition is ignorance. So I want to reach that audience, but at the same time, I'm so true to my IO roots. So that was the conflict for me, in terms of what I call it and how I do it. But he just said you should do a podcast, and I thought, well, man, that's a really good idea. And I set out. This was 2019, so they didn't have platforms like this, or I set out to try and figure out how to do it on my own. I set up. I watched some YouTube videos. I set up Adobe Audition, but I had to try and merge all the tracks and everything, and I sat there for like hours trying to figure that out. Couldn't figure it out. I'm like, this is a waste of my time. I'm not intellectually curious enough, or have so much resilience that I have to solve this problem. I'm going to work smart, not hard. So I tried to find a podcast producer. I went on Upwork and I found a guy, and he sucked. And then he just went MIA on me. So I never even got an episode. So I'm like, I'm not using Upwork. I auditioned some other Upwork people, and I just didn't like it. So I said to myself, I bet there's somebody in my hometown that has a really good podcast, and I'm going to find them and figure out who their producer is. So I looked for I'm based in New Orleans, all the local New Orleans podcasts. I found one. I contacted the guy. I said, I use this guy, Joel Sharpton. Contact Joel Sharpton. He's awesome. So he set up all the technology for me and everything. And we started out doing it using Skype when I first started, because they didn't have these platforms. And then he got us to a platform. So that's how it happened. And then from there, I got to balance this thing to be doing IO topics, but also talent acquisition topics. And that's it. And I just started inviting all the most interesting people I could think of. My first guest was Mark Newman, the founder of HireVue. He's probably the most well-known person I've ever had on there, and that was really cool combo. And so
you talk about this like it's the good old days. I mean, it's just like 4 years ago, right?
I know.
And
Yeah, it was 4 years
us kids
ago.
got it easy now, right? Like the old man syndrome.
I walked 15 miles to school in the snow with no shoes, man.
I think we're going to see the same thing with like Gen AI or AI in general applied to the IO space. Like, this is just the fucking beginning, right?
Oh yeah,
this is just the start of it.
Oh, it is. It's high, and it's the hiring space. I was reading an interview with a guy. I can't remember his name. He's the founder of a company called DeepMind, and he was talking about what comes next. And it's called interactive AI, and it's just the next evolution. And people who are talking here are saying that soon you're not going to be typing something into GPT window. You're going to say, go find me a nuclear scientist who has experience with power plants, and it's going to go off as an agent, we call it, and just fulfill that for you. And so you're going to be giving your AIs these tasks. They're going to analyze this data set, tell me the trends in mobile phone use in Pakistan over the past 50 years. I have a data set, or just go figure it out. And hopefully they bring back believable stuff, right? But I think that's where we're headed. It's pretty obvious. The extent to which we hand the keys over to these things, TBD, but there's a lot of people here going, here people are saying our field is really safe. What we do is safe because the machines can't do it. But one of the things, interesting stuff here, a big group of presentations about data privacy and cheating on stuff, right? And so one of the things that they're talking about is just the nuclear arms race and cheating, and how people are using GPT. So there's programs now that will keep your face centered in your computer, even if your face is actually moving. There's programs now that she told you, how can you actually defeat a browser lockdown? You can do an API call to Chat GPT in the background and time it, set a timer. So you set it up before. I don't even know the technical details, but it's possible to game every single thing. So at some point, I'm wondering, are companies just going to say, F it? Why are we even using these things? People can cheat on them. Doesn't matter. That's a possibility, right?
This is the role of G again. Like, these people are
Yeah.
fucking smart, right?
That's
Like,
what I
you
say.
want to hire that person. You want
Right.
to hire that person that does
Well,
it.
yeah, I know. It's kind of like that, but I thought the same thing. I wrote it in my notes, and then I was like, wait, isn't there an ethical concern because they're cheating? So it is the double-edged sword, the duality of AI. I just look at AI as a duality, good, evil. You can't have the good without the evil. You can't have good without evil. And so which side are you indexed on more? Which matters more to you? You know, in that tech support job I was talking about, we're thinking about, well, what if people use GPT to do this? Well, we're looking for tech savvy people amongst an hourly call center operation. That's not everybody. So if I figure out how to use GPT to answer these questions, I'm going to be probably pretty damn good at technology and pretty into it. So, or that's the rationalization I use when they ask me how am I going to guard against it so I don't lose my contract. That's what I'll say. You know, so it's a wild world, man. It's a wild world.
So, I mean, related to this topic, and this is actually how you came up on the podcast before a few weeks ago when we had Guru on the podcast, was this New York AI law, which I believe has gone into effect since then.
Yeah.
And you wrote an article, which I thought was quite intriguing about how, I mean, let's make it more broad than just the New York City law, because I think there's been a slew of these kind of talks of other laws coming out around the globe, that it potentially is looking to overturn things like the uniform guidelines of selection that we hold so dear in IO psychology. I don't know. Do you want to talk about that at all? And
Yeah.
because I thought it was a really interesting perspective.
Yeah. And, I kind of wrote that blog where I was talking as a conspiracy theorist because I don't know if the extreme of it is a conspiracy theory. It relates specifically to the New York law, which went through all this debate and all this back and forth. And, according to, I feel very badly right now. I can't remember this gentleman's last name. But if you find my blog, which should be available on my LinkedIn feed or whatever, his stuff cited in there. His idea is, look, this thing was actually pretty watered down. The people who were pulling the strings on making the changes made it such that it's really not hard to it's not hard to comply with this thing. It doesn't even come close to what the uniform guidelines require. The EEOC basic canon about what you're supposed to do that's enforced by the courts, even though it's not a law. And so, his thing is, well, big business wants to just make it easier so that there's not as many hurdles and you can do whatever you want in the hiring process. And ultimately, their goal would be to keep putting out stuff like this to make the uniform guidelines kind of irrelevant. I think that's an extreme viewpoint. You can't argue with the fact that big business may have agendas that drive everything that happens, because we kind of know that's true. But the reality of that extremism, I don't know. New York 144 is it's a thing. I don't know everybody in the corporate world. A lot of people I advise want to know how do we comply, but I don't know that a lot of people are actually doing the audits that you're supposed to do. But also, it's narrowed just to people who have an office in New York City or who are hiring somebody who's going to be working in New York City, kind of thing. So while the New York City's got a lot going on as far as jobs, it doesn't account for everything in the U.S. And that law is really, all it requires you to do is post impact ratios. So they don't even say 4/5 rule, but it's basically you gotta present, and that's only if the tool you're using can be called an AEDT, or automated electronic decision making tool. And what is actually defined, they give a very precise definition, but that doesn't mean it's easy for you to figure out if your tool is. It's like it has to substantially replace human judgment in the hiring process, with substantially not defined by any threshold. You can't override, a human can't override it. And I can't remember the other one offhand, but it basically is the idea that the machine is making a decision with no human intervention and no ability for humans to overturn it. And that does happen. That happens a lot. It also only applies to applicants. So any kind of sourcing tool, anybody who's a candidate but hasn't formally opted into the job hiring process doesn't apply to them. Um, you don't have to show any validity, right? Nothing. Doesn't have to be job related. You just have to post these ratios. And even if you are afoul of it, you don't have to make any changes. All you have to do is post the ratio, and that's it. And
It's
so,
like, yeah, we suck, right? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, kind of. And then everybody's like, well, also, plaintiffs' attorneys are just going to go start looking for ratios that are wrong, contact people, because the New York City isn't outwardly enforcing this. Like even the EEOC, you know, they'll probably be looking for stuff, poster child's cases or whatever. But New York has nothing like that. It's all inbound. So you got plaintiffs' attorneys who are just scanning job postings to see who's posting that they have bias and then going, hey, that's federally illegal. So, hey, people who had that happen to them who applied to this job, let's go get a class action. And then what about if I say, oh, they got bias? I'm going to apply for them, even though I'm not qualified, get rejected, and then go over to this guy who's legal guy, Saul Goodman there, and I'm gonna get some money out of this company.
I think the New York School Teachers Union had something similar to that. But this is like an interesting time where all the AI is new, and we do need guardrails. To your point, because like there's either good and evil, this sort of thing. But it's also like a very networked approach. Like a lot of organizations, although they are not based in New York, do have say offices in New York or make hiring decisions
definitely.
in New York, and therefore they need to. Essentially, this New York law will apply to their entire system because you can't just fabricate one thing for one group, right, or one city. You got to apply it to the entire system, make everything sort of even.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing, right? So I think that in that case, if you're an employer who's based in New York City, even though you're hiring people other places, you've got to comply with it because you're on the ground in New York City. But in these big mega corporations, they have offices everywhere. So if you have any kind of office, I would imagine if you have a 3-person office, somewhere, then do you have to comply? Probably, but there's no precedent yet. It's all going to be legal precedent, and the book on the legal precedent is blank right now. But California is about to pop a law that's obviously going to be much more restrictive. The EU is about to have their Algorithmic Accountability Act. And if you look at the GDPR, the EU enforces that. They're all over that. You have to comply to that. So if they have a similar one, I don't think it'll be like the US where people ignore it till they get caught. I think the preponderance of people over there are going to do what they need to do to comply. So that'll be pretty interesting, when that happens. So there's all these new things happening now that are very exciting but perplexing. It keeps things interesting. That's for sure.
It would be like trying to restore a classic car, right? And you drop a new modern engine in it, and like everyone's like, "Well, damn, we need to restore all the other cars to this standard."
Yeah, you just served me up a little softball there, huh?
I'm trying. It's not very good. I'm trying.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Just imagine you were an automotive restoration company in New York City. How would you react to this law?
Wow. This law, I would say, well,
please just tell us about your company.
Yeah, we can't find enough people to hire, so it doesn't matter. That's what's going on. So I do have a side passion job or company of restoring and modifying cars. I don't do that myself, and I don't get to spend enough time doing that because of the other stuff I'm doing. But it's going on underneath me in my office, and it's a good switch for my brain because I like solving problems. There's a couple things I'm always working on, and there's puzzles because we do a lot of modifying cars so they have updated modern powertrains and air conditioning and all that. So there's always little puzzles to solve. So that part's cool. Or I'll pick up a wrench and work on something a little bit.
Can you give me like a Model T with like a turbocharger on it, something like that?
Well, people do a lot of crazy stuff. People have I saw somebody. What did they put? They put a supercharged Hemi in a side by side, like one of those golf cart things with wheels. People do all kind of crazy stuff. I don't know where they get the time and money to do it, but my friend has been. I have another kind of sister. I have no financial stake in it, but it's kind of like one of these nice car storage clubs. So there's a bar in there, and we have happy hours. So it's a community of people who love cars, and there's a little mechanic shop in there. And my friend who's working in there, there's this 1912 Model T in there. It is nuts, man. It has like gas lanterns on it and a crank starter. It's a brass era car, so everything's made of brass. Everything's made of this finely crafted wood. It's got hand pinstriping. They needed new wheels. My friend drove the wheels to the Pennsylvania to some Amish wagon wheel maker because they're wooden wheels.
Last remaining vestige.
That's the kind of stuff that's so cool to see, the automotive history. And I don't know how much it really parallels the stuff we're talking about. I mean, the difference between a Model T and an EV is a lot, but it still has four wheels and it's explainable, so I don't know if there's a direct parallel there. From running that business,
Well, I do worry about these sort of situations. So we're entering the world of Gen AI, this sort of stuff in IO psychology, where like you can say like, hey, take this data set, go run with it, figure out all the things that are wrong, or show me the slopes, etc. But not understanding the underlying structure, understanding underlying even simple regression. That's the equivalent of having to take the wheel to the Amish because no one else knows how to do it anymore.
Right. Well, and if you have a modern car, I'm sure both of y'all do. It's for the last 20 years or so. When you open the hood, it's just plastic stuff. It's basically telling you, don't mess with this thing. Take it away. Just to the people you have to pay more, and even diagnosis. So one of the hardest parts of working on fixing cars is there's two things I say are the hardest: diagnosis and access. Figuring out what's wrong, and then stuff is buried. You got to take stuff out. You got to reach around. And that kind of thing. And so modern cars have an OBD port. You plug it in and it'll give you a code, or at the dealer, you can look at an entire replica on the screen of your car and you can pinpoint problems. So 90% of the common stuff, a tech at a dealer knows how to fix right away. It tells them everything to do. So the art of diagnosis is kind of being, lost a little bit. And then with EVs, I would draw the thing as just, it's a completely different kind of stuff. You're into electrical engineering, basically, which regular mechanics don't really have. But people are swapping. There's high-end places that are swapping classic Jaguars. A guy stopped by my shop. He had put an electric powertrain in a Pinto. People are putting stuff, and it won't explode, I guess. So that's good. But people are doing a lot of really interesting things. But one thing I can tell you, generative AI, trash time back here, truck backing up, but generative AI, it doesn't know anything about esoteric car stuff. I remember I was like, I'll give it a try. I'm trying to find, and finding obscure parts is one of my favorite things too. So I'm like, I need to find this or that for a 430 cubic inch engine from a 65 Lincoln Continental. And it just says, you should go to Napa, or you should go here. It doesn't have anything like, the deep esoteric knowledge that you have. So there's some areas where it doesn't know what to do still. That's interesting.
Well, if only an AI is listening to this podcast, it's gonna fill those gaps really quickly and self-actualize and take over before long. So
I don't know. It might. I don't know. We don't know. I asked ChatGPT that, are you planning? Because I've also gotten into this. I've spent a lot of time lately. I get up really early and I have my clear thinking time, and I've been doing all this existential dialogue with it about. I had this idea that I call generative AI supernatural math, because it's all just probabilities being run, but the result does not seem like math. It seems like an actual person, even though we know it's not. So then I started thinking, well, math pretty much runs the universe, and we didn't invent math. We just discovered it, just like Ben Franklin discovered electricity. I'm here in Philadelphia, right? So, we discover stuff about math, and then we apply it. And so math has been there; it runs everything. So I started kind of thinking, well, if it's made of math, and math is an unexplainable supernatural force, where the hell did it come from? Where did the universe come from? Then is it supernatural? So I ask it, is it supernatural? And it says no, because supernatural means something you can't explain, and you can explain what I do. And I'm like, well, I don't know. Most people cannot explain how some of this stuff happens, so it won't believe that. But then I kind of asked it, well, is your role, because part of my thinking is maybe we're just an evolutionary stop on the ultimate destination, and our job was to create this thing that'll take over from us. So I kind of asked it that and said, oh, no. That's not my agenda.
No, that's a robot overlord answer.
Well, don't you pretty soon you get into like an unfalsifiable loop of you're asking it, why are you lying to me? But there's no
Right.
way to prove, are you lying to me? Like
Exactly.
it seems like you get into these loops
100%.
pretty quickly.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's really fun. I asked it the other day, then I'll just ask it stuff that it seems like a mystery to me. I asked it, where I went to find my favorite pair of socks, and I can only find one. Like, where do all the other socks go? I asked it, and it said, well, they probably get sucked into the workings of your washing machine. I'm like, well, that isn't possible, because wouldn't that make my washing machine break? It said, no, there's spaces in there where it can go. And then I started asking it all these things like, well, what if I bought 2 pairs of every socks that I wanted? How much extra would I spend a year? Well, the average American male buys this many pairs of socks in a year. And, I said, well, how much would that cost me? Well, it depends. Some socks are really cheap, but there's other kinds of socks that are really expensive. And you can just go off on these tangents. But it doesn't know where those socks are. Well, it said human error. It said human error was the problem.
So, you're the problem. Yeah, you're the problem at the end of the day.
Anyway, I'm digressing, but these are some of the fun.
Well, Charles, you're a New Orleans guy, and New Orleans is one of my favorite cities in the world. If anybody's going to visit New Orleans in the near future, which I may or may not be doing, is there anywhere off the beaten path that we should be checking out? And what's your favorite flavor of daiquiri too? Because I just out of curiosity.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, I like daiquiris, but sugar and fruit and alcohol, you might as well just like stab a knife in my gut. I can't really do it.
Yeah,
I love the
it's
taste,
a rough
but I can't do it.
That ship has sailed.
Yeah, there was this crazy daiquiri shop that closed down in my neighborhood, or my old neighborhood, and they had all these different ones. Some of them I can't repeat here. I don't think it's appropriate, but they had one called the Soldier Slim. I like that one a lot. That was a good one. It's kind of
nice.
crazy. I avoid any drink that's bright blue, so I didn't ever have one of those. But I like a good margarita, and with some mezcal in there. I can usually have one of those. So I'm trying to think off the beaten path. Man, everything's so well known now, but the neighborhood, which is also getting there's not as many secrets left anymore after social media and stuff. There's just not places that you can go to that people don't know about as much. But the neighborhood I used to live in, the Bywater, that's a pretty cool neighborhood. There's really good bars and restaurants. My friend owns a bar called Bud Rips on the corner of Piety and Burgundy. That bar room itself is like stepping back in time in terms of what it looks like in there. That's a very cool place. I don't know if it's still open. There's a place right off Bourbon Street by Pat O'Brien's called the Dungeon. That used to be one of my favorite bars. It's pretty much dungeon themed. I mean, they've got cages and bars, and it's down and then it's up, and it's all convoluted, and there's skeletons and stuff everywhere. That's a pretty cool
Here's a controversial question: are beignets overrated? Are they just funnel cake?
Beignets, they are a little different than funnel cake because they're puffy in the middle.
It's the puffiness.
Every time I eat one, it's hard for me to say this is overrated. Standing in line.
That's totally fair. That is totally fair. Like, you eat one, you're happy as a clam.
Yeah, standing in line is overrated because I don't like standing in line. for the Cafe Du Monde in the quarter, there's always a huge line. But it's a good experience, for sure.
The architecture and history of New Orleans is just fantastic.
Oh.
And then like you match that with people like carrying around like a whalebone of green daiquiri that's, the size of their torso.
Yeah, and there's just always just these random non sequitur people, running around. There's been a lot of legendary people like that, but you see things where you double take, no matter where you are. Really, you're like, what the hell is that? Who is that person?
Well, speaking of double taking, you want to hop into the confusion matrix?
Yeah, definitely.
The confusion matrix.
Here we go. We're gonna do a little switcheroo on you. We're gonna do 5 questions. Stochastic terrorism. You up for it, Charles?
For what kind of terrorism?
Stochastic.
I don't even know what that is. So first of all,
It just means random. It's just a highfalutin word.
For
you'll love these because it's loosely based on the Big 5. Okay.
Okay, cool.
So number 1, how many books can you read at one time?
None. No. I would say I think I forgot how to read a book. I would think you could read 2 if you listen to one on an audio book and read one with your eyes, but I think that would be very hard. So I'd say one for me.
1, just keep track of the actual characters. Like now they got Claude.ai.
Oh! I thought you meant in parallel at the same moment. You're talking about could I be reading 4 different books?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying? Oh,
yes,
yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's like 15 because I start them and then I don't have a time to go finish them. So I would say literally right now I've got 4. Might take me a year to finish them.
You're a man of my heart. I got the same thing. I got like 4 different ones open right now. What are you reading right now, Cole? You read anything?
Yeah, I've got like, I think you can literally see them behind me. I think I have like 9 books that I'm halfway through. I'm not sure I'll finish any of them.
That's
to
the
be
beauty
honest.
of it.
But I do
Yeah.
have, I think, 2 new books on the way that I'm excited about.
Yeah.
Okay, Charles. Are you routine driven? Like, do you sleep at the same time every day?
I am very routine driven, but there's a lot of degrees of freedom in the middle. So I'm routine driven in the AM and the PM, and what happens in the middle can go any direction. But yeah, I am super regimented in the morning. Like I actually get into these weird, what was the efficiency studies that they did? I can't remember. It's basic. Is it Hawthorne Electric?
Hawthorne studies, yeah.
I do a Hawthorne studies on myself where I'm like, if I drink iced coffee, then I can sleep 3 minutes later because I don't have to wait for the coffee pot. I do that kind of stuff, So my morning is extremely regimented, and my evenings are pretty regimented.
I like your blend of rationalization and psychology. This is really good stuff.
Yeah.
It's just the path to self-actualization, really, right? You just
I love
optimize yourself.
Yeah. And I meditate every morning. Like the highlight of my day is morning. I have like three steps on my meditation path there, and then I do some yoga. That's the highlight of my day. I got a joke for you that I used to say.
Bring it.
I used to say, and this is true, like this is a true thing. I used to say I wasn't a morning person, and then I realized I was just hungover all the time. So, essentially, once I calmed down.
That's a very New Orleans joke.
Yeah, once I calmed down and became an adult, I realized I really am a morning person. It was just obfuscated by alcohol.
Many good days have been lost searching for good nights, definitely.
Yeah.
What's the biggest risk you've ever taken? You're very accomplished, but there must be something that stands out.
The biggest risk I've ever taken?
Yeah.
Man, I wish I was a bigger risk taker because
It's like, please don't admit to like killing someone.
No, I don't have it. I mean, but no, man. What's the biggest risk I ever took? I'm not That's a really great question. I am in the confusion matrix because I don't know.
How about this? How about like a failure that you wish you had back? Like you're like, damn, I could do that again.
Yeah. I would say it was how I approached building our little test delivery platform. That one kind of lives with me a lot. I didn't know much about doing that. I think I should have evaluated my options a little bit better. It's cost me some money, but I learned. So here's the thing: I do make truckload of mistakes like everybody. Some of
Only
them are
way to grow.
costly to my wallet, but they're just opportunities to learn. And so my lessons are expensive sometimes, but I think there was some stupid stuff I did when I was younger that I'd like to have back. Nothing criminal, really, but just stupid. So
Do you say yes more or no more?
I think I say yes more, but I'm not a yes man. You know,
You're open to opportunities, right?
definitely. I love being open to opportunities. That's one of my biggest things. I like to say I'm a broad thinker. Um, and so I'll think of ridiculous stuff. Like my wife hates it. She's not narrow-minded, but she's very clear. She'll say, "How do we solve this problem?" And I'll start bringing up all this stuff that I know is not really the way to solve it, but it helps calibrate me. And she's like, "What are you talking about?" We
I
got
think you're
this.
just tapping
So,
into the metaverse, your own like
yeah,
personal metaverse.
totally, man. I am there all the time.
Final one. Like, are you calm in a crisis? Or are you like hair on fire?
No, I'm pretty calm. It takes me a minute, though. I'm actually less calm in things that aren't a crisis. I think like I look at myself and I go, "What are you doing?" I got a kid, 9-year old, but we read this book. I don't know if you have kids. If you ever read Go Dog Go, the Dr. Seuss book, it's actually not Dr. Seuss. Same it's the same style, same company, but it's a different guy. I can't remember his name. Some say it's a pen name that Dr. Seuss also used, but it's just about these two dogs, and they're you got to read it. It's a great book. I still like it,
Like
but
Yeah,
they
math.
get a
don't spoil Go Dog Go for our listeners.
no. There's one situation where they do something, and the one dog's tall and the other dog's small, and they go to a hotel, and one dog's bed is too small for him, and the other dog's bed is too long for him, and they have a phone, and they're like, well, let's just switch, and then they say, don't make big problems out of little problems, and that sticks in my head all the time. If I'm starting to make a big problem out of a little problem, I stop myself right away because those dogs can do it. So can I.
Is sage advice from what master's level Seuss, not Dr.
Yeah,
Seuss.
exactly.
This is great. This is really good stuff. I'm loving
Well,
it.
I want to tell you guys something too. I've been doing, like you said, my podcast for a while. Now, you do them much more regularly. I'm like every month, and now I'm in a little transition, so I haven't done one in about 2 months, although I have some episodes recorded. And so like I said, I hadn't really been on one besides a little one before. And just you guys have such a great, fun, you're you're allowing me to think about how I can up my game and be in a little bit more entertainment value. I think sometimes I'm a little bit too focused on the content and not bringing the bigger picture of who is this person and how do they think, and that really helps us understand the issues they're talking about and thinking about, and it's fun. So you've inspired me. I'll just let you know.
Well, that's really sweet, Charles.
Yeah.
We weren't intending to help you out in any way, but I'm glad we could be of service.
Well, I don't know. We all got to stick together, right? I mean, I don't know
Yeah,
how many
man.
IO podcasts there are. There's probably more and more now because it's easier, but there's probably less than 10, I would think. Whereas in
Yeah.
other industries, there's probably a lot more.
I think we're trying to recreate the SIOP lobby experience, right? Just having good conversations with good people.
Yeah, I've been doing that. I've been doing that in the IRL, as my kid would say.
IRL.
IRL in real life. Yeah, right here. I'm heading out.
Well, Charles, you want to join us in the nerdery?
Yeah, let's do that.
The nerdery. Let's do some nerdery.
Where you want to go, bud?
I think I'll kick us off. I wanted to just tease this one little meme real quick, and then I want to throw us a curveball. I saw this week, and I was just like, this is too clever not to share on the podcast. From a guy on LinkedIn named Vin Vashista, I think is how you say it, or yeah, Vashista. And he says, after you realize it should be called generative BI because all they use it for is reporting. I thought that
Right.
was kind of a hilarious sort of meme here.
I read
But
it. I read it.
um, I did want to cover one other thing real quick. Give me a second to pull it up about this article I found that I know you guys haven't seen, but I think the title kind of says it all. It was a study that said honest people tend to migrate towards honest areas, depriving their places of origin of human capital. And so they go through a list of like kind of historical examples of how when an area is kind of corrupt, the good people in the area leave the area and then the area stays corrupt because the good
Right.
people left the area. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is the perfect way of describing organizational culture change initiatives. So a lot of times what organizations will do is they'll try to hire new people in and bring in new blood, and that will change the culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then those people are like, we don't fit in this culture, we're going to leave. And then the culture stays the same
Mm.
because it's reinforced with this kind of mechanism. And so I don't know if you guys have ever tried to do any kind of like culture change initiatives, but I was like, wow, this is exactly the framework. And I didn't really have a good way of describing it as to why I think that kind of stuff fails sometimes.
This is the ASA model, right? Essentially, just
Yeah, it's essentially
attraction.
the ASA
Yeah.
model.
Um, I've never really been part of a lot of them, but I do think a lot of times when you want to change the culture, you fire people. Though you're like, all right, these are the people that don't fit. They're out of here. I'm bringing in my own people, right? Yeah. So whether that's good or bad, someone who's internally brought in to change the culture often just does a replacement process, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's, and then maybe as part of that, yeah, oh look, Susie lost her job to these a-holes, and so did Ralph, and so did so and so. I'm not working here anymore. These people suck. I'm out of here. So yeah, that could be it. But I don't know how much they're attract. That's like the core of it. And then I guess once you've established the new culture, you start recruiting people for that culture, and then you're attracting people. I haven't even thought about ASA in about 30 years, but I know it. Schneider, that's some Schneider stuff. I'm in that academic through my
Good, good citation pull.
dissertation
Nice.
family tree. My major professor was a Schneider person, so I have that kind of in my. I got to remember that stuff, but I haven't applied that very much. But it's
Well,
totally practical. It makes sense.
so many culture initiatives they tend to form from top down. So like we tell the
Oh
senior
yeah,
leaders we have a culture problem and we need to like make changes, and they may do something, and it goes to maybe middle managers, and like you're really hoping it diffuses throughout the organization, but that's really tough because culture is really based on social norms created through interactions with essentially ground level people. That the 10 12 people around you is your culture. That's your environment, that's your work experience, so that's what you really need to affect in these sort of things, and like that through the
yeah.
incentive structure or what have you.
Yeah.
It's what interests me the most is organizations that have a very famous, well-known founder that they all worship as the
Mm-hmm.
founder, right? A very identifiable person. So and that person's values, they shape the values of the company or whatever, and that is really interesting. And how does that really stay? I think about like, well, what does that mean for a company Elon Musk, founded? I mean, he's an interesting character, right? But you almost see when you look at him, how in the hell could you have a company if you're just doing what this guy does? Um, you know, but not obviously he's doing something right, I would think. But anyway, so
Well, I think you're right. Whether it's Elon or Jack Ma, Bezos, Musk, like whatever, whoever you say, like
Tony Shea,
essentially
like
the words are like evangelized, and
yeah,
it's like,
yeah,
oh, they said this once 25 years ago.
yeah.
We must follow it. But
Well, but they formed the company based on those values, right? And
yes,
so if
absolutely, and it
if they
worked.
yeah, if they and it worked for them because they grew and grew, and then how true to those things people stay, and how immutable those values are across the technology and just the world changing. Also, may not be, but I do a lot of work with organizations that want to build assessments around their culture model, and I've always found that to be pretty interesting. Most companies, no offense to any of my clients, but when you inherit these models and there hasn't been an IO in there, the first thing I notice is the contamination. They'll have 7 values, but the operational definitions will just be all over the place. They're not
Yeah.
they're not clinging to that one value. If you factor analyzed them, they wouldn't load on a factor. They'd just be, spaghetti
Well, and
against the
that's
wall.
kind of how I think about it. And this is sort of building off Scott's point from earlier, which is like I always look at an organization through the lens of like, who are the made men here? Like to use like a
Yeah,
mafia reference, and
yeah,
it could
yeah,
be women too,
yeah.
right? Who are the people who could get away with murder and they're still going to make it at this organization? Whatever values that group of people has, or whatever the culture is amongst that group of people, that's the culture at the organization, and it's not going to change. And so, unless you, again,
Mhm.
like to your point, Charles, like you strategically fire people or, hire, try to make a substantive difference, that's really what the core of a organization's culture is.
Yeah, and I also go back to individual. I mean, I think organizations have microcultures also based on the leader in that area, right? So you could
Oh,
have a
absolutely.
division of, Acme, that's California, that manufactures, anvils, and you got a leader there, and they do with their style, and it rolls down to every little group. So that's one of the things that makes it hard. You can have individual leaders that you know that are better than others, or have a um, better manifestation of a company culture, or create their own. It's a really thorny issue. Then
It's
you start getting into homogenization of the organization. Like, I'm doing a lot of culture ad, is a thing where you're looking at.
Overnight change.
It's not about everybody being the same. It's about everybody bringing their unique things to the table so that you create a multidisciplinary team. And there's a lot of research that shows that more diverse organizations, teams that have more diverse types of thought, perform better. Just Google that. There's tons of it.
I
So
mean, yeah, this is well known in network analytic parlances. You bring in
yeah,
new, fresh ideas, and all of a sudden, like you can challenge assumptions and like bring in fresh perspectives and actually produce better results.
if people listen, I mean, that's the thing. It goes back to the leaders. Who are the made people here? If someone comes in with really good but radical ideas that might threaten that leader, or that leader doesn't like change, good luck getting those ideas actually done. So then you leave. Attraction, selection, attrition, whatever.
Ronald Byrd has a great study on this. Like, you need some people to stick around and like several new people to come in at the same time. You can't have
Yeah,
like a group that's just all intact, or a group of all new people, or just one new person. You need
right.
like a good mix of old and new.
So let me ask you this: what the hell does G have to do with thriving in an organizational culture?
You can't spell culture without G.
Well, it's in there. I would say I've had clients where they are so, and this isn't a good thing necessarily. I'm thinking on my feet here, because I'm standing up.
Hey,
Where
hey.
there's actually like a elitism on some of the leadership assessments that this company did, where you sit through 8 hours of all these cognitive and battery of stuff, and if you can't get this level, you're not even material for that company.
Yeah.
So that's a cultural aspect where the culture is elitism around how smart you are. But I don't know that that has anything to do with job performance. And back to G2, one thing someone talked about today, and I always say this: you could be the smartest person on earth, if you don't show up for work, then you're not
Yeah.
applying your smarts to the job. So there's got to be more than just how smart you are.
Give me someone motivated. They'll run
Yeah,
through a brick wall for me. Definitely.
exactly. Motivated, energized around what it is that you want to do. Engaged, I would say.
Well, Scott, what's our next topic?
Let's engage in something else here. So MIT has this article: a new forecasting model surpasses machine learning. So I mean,
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know about this, but this is pretty crazy. So a new forecasting model emphasizes the value of unusualness in the data, potentially outperforms machine learning
I
models in
read
areas like.
this. I scanned this. Yeah, is it in? I think they cited it in Wired or something. It was in my news feed. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so like they use Monhovis distance to essentially
Yeah.
identify
Hmm.
outliers in the data, which is actually a really interesting sort of concept. They do have like an interesting point here, like a weird point that linear regression is a bit of a black box. It's like I can't really think of anything less black boxy than
I know
linear
that is.
regression.
You know what? I thought the exact same thing. How is regression a black box? I mean, maybe fancy forms of it, but no, you're throwing variables in that you think are important and seeing how much variance they account for. Not very black box to me.
But I think the overall point is like we often will throw out outliers because like they don't fit our
Right.
modeling parameters. But these people are saying, hey, they offer really unique perspectives, and we should
Yeah.
use them in the model. I think that's the overall
Right. From
message.
an from a pure evolutionary standpoint, where would we be without outliers? Where would we be without people that don't match and then survive to perpetuate their not matchingness to something that's valuable? I mean, I love outliers, you know,
They
and
mess up your
Yeah.
correlation coefficients,
they
definitely.
they do. You can exterminate them, but you may not be telling the truth. I guess if there's enough people there, they're not an outlier. Where's the threshold that someone's an outlier or not? There must be a statistical convention for that. I don't really know.
Yeah. I find myself daydreaming and thinking, where would we be without Malinobis distances? You know?
Yeah, I never heard of that
Every night.
before. It sounds like a bad ANOVA, an evil ANOVA procedure, the malanova. When I picture outlier, though, like I'm very visual, I think of a scatter plot with a line and one dot up at the top. That's
Totally.
what comes to mind for me when you say outlier.
Totally. Have you ever heard like Brinkerhoff analysis? They use it in
Uh-uh.
training. It's essentially this analysis where they find someone that performed really well after training. Like everyone
Uh-huh.
else may have failed, but this one person, they took it to heart and they actually performed well. This is what it kind of reminds me of. Like you find the one instance where this really worked and run with it. Kind of like lasso regression, where you
Yeah.
just eliminate all the other things that are just kind of normal, leave the one
And
outlier as the
back to
use
culture,
case.
right? Maybe there's somebody who has an amazing revelation and they're seen as like a heretic and no one listens to them. And then they go somewhere else and invent the post a note, you know, to another
Oh,
company or
absolutely.
something. So that's part of how culture can actually, work against you. I'm a big believer in the great human theory. When I learned it, it was called the great man theory. But that there's certain people like an Einstein or I don't know, a Teddy Roosevelt, whatever. There's certain people who allow us to stand on the shoulders of giants, right? And what those people are saying, if you even look at Einstein, I mean, you watch that. There's a mini series, Einstein. I can't remember the name of it. It's really
Hmm.
awesome. He had a lot of trouble getting people in a very formal, rigid Austrian scientific community. Nobody wanted to listen to him. They thought he was crazy. But turns out, he's pretty damn smart, and he was dedicated enough to his ideas that he made it happen. So just because you're an outlier, you know,
Well,
you,
yeah. Anytime you're challenging the paradigm, I mean, you're going to be kind of ostracized. This sort of thing, which is kind of
yeah.
the crazy thing about organizational culture, because a lot of times you're said that you're told, "Hey, we want people with fresh perspectives. Bring your authentic self. Do all this sort of stuff." You're like, "Okay, I'm here," and they say, "You don't fit the culture. You're not in the box. We want you to think outside the box, but you got to get in the box."
Now people have such a platform with YouTube, social media to find other people who, uh, or it's a great way to get attention by just saying I don't believe in what everybody else does, and then people are like, oh, that's so interesting. You're going against the grain. Maybe you're somebody I need to look at. So it's become all that stuff's become even crazier now. You know?
We'll do one more. I feel gypped by this article. Former Nutrisystem CEO wants to use AI to democratize talent. I showed this to Cole. I was like, "Hey, let's talk about this," but it had nothing to do with really
No,
AI. So for the last
not at
sentence,
all. You know what? That's an example of clickbait. That's
click
classic, pure
clickbait.
clickbait right there. Oh, AI, I want to read about that. That's what I did, and I got to the bottom. And I'm like, that's a bunch of BS right there, man. You know?
So, just in a nutshell, a 2022 study found that American women only held 40% of corporate jobs, and this Nutrisystem CEO is evidently given an interview, and she advises women not to overthink opportunities and highlights that women need to take. They tend to undervalue their own skills. She recalls instances of female contributions that were overshadowed, and she encourages women to take control of their career and highlights the disproportionate role of networking in career opportunities. and hoping that it is like what you mentioned, the last sentence, hoping AI can lead to a more objective talent evaluations.
Yeah.
Okay, went through all that just to get one sentence.
Don't we all wish it could just be that simple?
That was a pretty lightweight article. I felt like it did. I didn't really gain anything.
Well, this is me just reading the headline or the abstract, like you mentioned, Charles, and just like rolling with it.
Well, I read it. It was short, and I can't remember because I've read all these ones. So maybe you guys sent me, or in the pre-thing, there was an examples thing. I thought that might have applied to one of your past ones, but it turns out that it applied to this one. So I'm damn glad that I actually took the time to read it, so I had time to think about it on my own, like I think about any article.
I think that there is one point here that she encourages women. However, I'd apply it to any grad student coming out. Be a hand raiser. Don't overthink things. Just go for it.
I do like that.
Well, Scott, can I kind of flip it on you as like a thought experiment? Like, if this article hadn't been clickbait, what would it have been about? You know?
Oh, well, I would have loved to read it, but essentially a lot of things that Charles does, right? We're using AI to hire and select better people for the job.
Well, I don't use AI as much, but I talk about it and I think about it and I advise people about it. But you know, I haven't built any AI tools to do this kind of thing. I'm still pretty straight up traditional measure development, kind of thing. I think about what could AI do, how can it be done. I'm going to HR Tech next week. That's going to be really interesting to see what people are coming up with there. That's always a very interesting circus.
Well, I think the holy grail is like job analysis on the fly. So
absolutely
running that and being able to update it every quarter or what have you, every year.
There's definitely some good stuff here about using LLMs for job analysis. I've done it myself just to get started with stuff, and actually ONED is going to start having a feed or be based on some LLM stuff about jobs. So there's there's some pretty good presentations about when it's appropriate to use, and I do think it's good. But I'll tell you, it misses stuff. Again, there's the technical support job I'm talking about. This having to love technology. When I type in there, give me a job analysis results or competency model for this job at this company, it does not know that you have to be passionate about mobile technology. If those are the most successful people, completely miss that. So it's a good example of it. Got all the other stuff, but if you're not a human in there looking at what's going on, you're going to miss a very important thing about the job. So a lesson that we can't just go by it, but I definitely think it can help with job analysis.
Well, Charles, I mean, I think that sounds like a nirvana that we can all aspire to. But thank you so much for joining us today. I think this has been a really fun conversation. Before I give you the final word, Charles, Scott, any final words?
Charles, man, nice to meet you today. You're a team player. This is our first time podcasting outdoors, I believe.
I'm an innovator.
In the past.
I'm an outlier. I am an outlier. I'm right out here. I'm not lying down.
You are an outlier.
If I were lying down, I'm an outstander right now, I guess. But you get to see people walking by. So I enjoy doing it too, man. Thank you guys so much.
Yeah.
Time has flown. I didn't realize it's even been an hour. So.
Yeah, this has been the Inlier podcast with Colin Scott. This is you've been listening to Directionally Correct, the People Analytics podcast with Colin Scott and Dr. Charles Handler. Thanks for joining us, Charles.
Thank you guys very much.
As always, all opinions are our own and do not reflect those of any other organization.
You've been listening to Directionally Correct, the People Analytics podcast with Colin Scott.